So you're all very welcome to another edition of the Eddie Walsh podcast. I'm joined as ever by Eddie himself from Action Coach. How are you, Eddie?
I'm good, thanks, Brennan. How are you?
And we have a number of very, very special guests today who are going to talk to us about leadership at the very cold face of Irish business, if you like. And it's our special topic through these chats, Eddie, that we look at coaching, which is a great passion of yours. As you work with Action Coach, you work directly with a lot of business owners. So we're going to talk about really leadership, leading your team, managing yourself, managing your time, managing your mood, managing your business, with a special emphasis on what's happened over the last year and a half, because it has been a very challenging time for business around the world. But what we've found, Eddie, with some of these chats so far, that the challenge has brought some great new ideas into light, and I think that's important just to put that across. So I have with me today of Ciarán Brennan, who is a co-founder of Livecosts.com. Ciarán, how are you?
Hey, Brennan, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
And Ronan McGrath, he's the principal with McGrath Consultants. Ronan, how are you?
Very good, Brennan. Thank you very much.
And Cathal Sheridan of Hukubalance. Cathal, how are you?
Great, Brendan. Thanks a million for having me on. Appreciate it.
You're all very welcome. Eddie, let's start from your perspective, and talk a little bit about leadership in the time of COVID. If you were to look at what are the most important traits of a leader, what does a leader really need to have in challenging times like these?
Yeah, I think in terms of the leadership piece, there's 5, if not 6, really important things to focus on as a leader, especially in a time of challenge. And if I take them sort of individually, one of them is knowledge. So if we think about, like, if I'm a leader of a company, knowledge of the marketplace, knowledge of anything that I can get my hands on in terms of increasing my knowledge is really important. But there's 2 areas. One is if we think about it as a sports player, one of knowledge of the sport, if you think of a sports coach, and then knowledge of the player. So a great coach, great leader has enough knowledge of the sport and the player to put the 2 of them together to optimize the results from that person. Does that make sense? In terms of that? So knowing what it is that they're playing and knowing how they play and putting them together and then motivating them into that sort of sense. The next sort of things really are sort of listening, and great leaders are great coaches, and the words are almost indistinguishable these days. You know, we talk a lot about this coaching piece and being a leader, and that is listening. And very often you're listening for things that people are saying, but they're not saying them through words. They might say them as an excuse about something, but you can see or hear behind that. It's listening to what is actually going on. Another key trait of this sort of coaching leader type person is integrity. And again, if we think about this as an idea, it is that you have, if you've got team members, you have their back. You might be pushing them to succeed in things that they may not be, may not feel themselves that they're inclined to do. They might need a push, okay? But they've got to know that you have their back, that you're pushing them to succeed because it's a positive thing. It's not you're not overrunning them and pushing them to succeed because it's all about you. It's actually part of this conjoined thing that you're both doing. And that integrity piece is really important, because that's when people follow leaders. If they have integrity in the sense, yes, he or she is pushing me, but we both agree that that's a really important thing for me, that I need it. For me to achieve the next level, I probably do need a little bit of a push and a hand holding and a bit of a prod in here. And again, that goes back to the sport and player idea. And then the last 2, which I think, you know, you could almost split them out because they're sort of similar but not quite, is the passion and motivational skill of the leader. And that's, I suppose, the piece that's been very difficult for us for the last year is to maintain the passion and the motivation. And the bit that I find that's, you know, if you think again about the sports analogy, if the captain or the coach is on the sideline and you're saying, what do we do now? And their heads are down and they don't know and they're shrugging their shoulders. Well, guess what's happening to the team? Team are falling apart. And that's what you were alluding to, Breandán, about how do you self-maintain or self-motivate, or how do you keep the passion alive? That's really important for us as leaders, is that we've got to be around, we've got to have that almost overabundance of passion to bring people along. And that's been the thing. I think that's, certainly in a lot of my clients' cases, having a coach and helping them with that passion piece and realigning it, as often as they can, has helped them through this piece, and just to reposition themselves and look at what they can actually achieve. And I think one of the key pieces is understanding what we call the locus of control. What can I actually control? And then outside of the marketplace, what is out of my control completely? What can I focus on with the team to actually get done? And you mentioned that earlier, Brennan, is about, becoming leaner or becoming better at things, or training or education, or re-systemizing or reframework and getting ready for the next thing. So there's a lot of ideas in there in terms of what a good leader, a good coach could be. So that's sort of in a nutshell.
Okay. Before I go on to the guys, Eddie, just you mentioned sporting comparisons a little bit there, and you mentioned them in some of the other podcasts as well. And if I look at it certainly in terms of soccer, I'm sure with a lot of other types of sports, there's been a huge change in the style of management, let's say, between your Jack Charlton, who was a real kind of tough, my way or the highway type leader, to the type of leaders or coaches, managers that we have nowadays. I'm thinking the Jurgen Klopps now and these guys who are much more, maybe they're more man managers in a way. Has that been the same? I know that's a coarse view and maybe it's very generalized, but has that happened in business, that you need different traits over the years?
Yeah, definitely. One of the key elements, I think, that again, just talking about all my clients' companies, is if you're a payroll accounts assistant sitting in an office somewhere, if you're in office A and you're in office B, and you're in office A and you're engaged in the company, you're included in the goals, you're listened to, and you're in office B and you're told to shut up, keep quiet, just do your work, okay? You're going to find office A and you're going to want to work there, and you're not going to want to work in office B. Even if the pay is the same or maybe slightly more in office B, you're not going to handle that anymore. That's just not the way it works. You're going to find these people that are engaging in you, that are bringing you along as part of a whole thing, and allowing you to understand what part of the process you're really important and you're of real value in.
Yeah. And I wonder, why has that changed, Eddie? Why was the Jack Charlton style of leadership very efficient back in the late 80s, early 90s? And why is the Jurgen Klopp style of leadership extremely efficient nowadays? I wonder what has made that change.
Yeah, I think when you look at, just in terms of that sporting, and you look at the amount of income the players have, they don't really necessarily have to toe the line. They know that if they step away from this team, that another team will engage with them and they'll be able to play at another team at that sort of level. And it's exactly the same idea as the bookkeeper, is if you don't like the manager, you don't like the way it's going, you're on to your agent saying, I need to be happy, I need to have more fun, I need to be more engaged. Because that way people understand that sort of tribe or company teamwork, where it's nice to go to the office, or it's nice to go into business, or it's engaging. Yes, it might be lively, rather than sitting there and everybody afraid to open their mouth. Yeah,
great. Well, listen, I have 3 leaders here from Irish business, and I want to go straight to them, because let's see really leadership at the coalface. Okay, let me talk to you first, Ciarán, Brennan. Tell us about the business first, Ciarán, and how the last year has been for you, and maybe then your attitudes towards leadership from your end.
Yeah, so my background is in construction. Qualified as a carpenter in 2006 into probably the worst recession we've ever seen. So lesson number one in business, timing matters. So off I went to Australia to, I suppose, climb the construction ladder, if you want to put it that way. And very much started to figure myself out as a person, and felt that maybe I wasn't best placed to be on sites, and I had more of an interest in the business side of things. And slowly started to find my feet in the way into the business, learned some harsh lessons, had some failures, and eventually got one up and running, a successful one that we exited from. And in that particular time, found a complete lack of systems and efficiencies within the sector as a whole. Actually, when we done the research, we couldn't find technology to fix a simple problem we had within our own business, so we built our own. And I just decided that that was scalable and exciting, and construction businesses generally will regionalised sometimes to go into the next region, like as in Irish business will tap into the UK market. And what I liked about the technology sector is it's just a global play and there's no ceiling to it, and that excited me. So went from carpenter to business owner to technology business owner, and we've been tipping away at that for a while with, you know, companies. The last year's been a real struggle, but we've managed to do okay. We're now in 5 regions with Ireland, UK, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. That all happened through COVID. Mm-hmm. You know, we've doubled the staff through COVID. You know, so it's, I suppose, if I bring that full circle into leadership, through that time was a lot of change, and, you know, what we call, you know, startup world pivots. And I suppose when you get a team involved, and in month 1, let's call it, we have a vision on the board of what we're trying to achieve in this quarter, and me as a leader of a business is coming back saying, well, that's gone, now we're going to go this way. The only way to manage that situation is absolute over communication, because certain individuals will say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, he keeps changing the goalposts here, bring it back to sports, this guy's moving, you know, he doesn't know what he wants to do. But how do we pivot through tough times, which they were? Let's be honest, no one had an easy COVID, and we're still not out of it yet. But how do we communicate, how do we navigate through that? For me, it's about over communication, and through that point in time, creating massive amount of security for people that are working underneath you. So we would have been under pressure from, you know, some investors, for example, to say, what's the wage cut look like for COVID? And for me as a leader, I had to stand strong in that and say, we ain't having one. Because as a startup business, if trying to evaluate a big business making cuts, I completely understand. You've got to do it. You've got to do it. You've got to do pay cuts and make our way back. In a startup business with a small team, where culture is a driver, team is a driver, cutting costs for me just wasn't an option, and I had to stand over that. So for me, it's very much, you know, lead by example, create a massive amount of security, and then just over communicate through what was a pretty tough time.
Okay. And how did you find the reaction from the staff then to that communication? Did you feel that they responded positively back from it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from a staff point of view, I think it's unrealistic to think that staff are going to have the same passion for your business as you do. And I think you've first of all got to get a real understanding of what that. There's no staff member is going to come in and have the same drive, passion, and want to do as you do as a founder or business owner. So I think you first of all got to understand that. So what can you do, I suppose, will be the next question to maybe drive. And there's plenty of things you can do in profit sharing, and they're what we call tactics. But at a higher level, I suppose, bring it back to communication. I would always have an individual one-to-one with everybody and say, what are you trying to achieve? Like, what's your goal? You know, not this is my business goal, but what's your goal? And if I can help you get there along the way, well, by all means I will. And if you outgrow us, we'll shake hands and I'll help you find that next position. But I think it's crazy to think that we're going to get a staff member in who's going to want to live and breathe everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. It's just not going to happen. So I think, again, it comes back to the same thing for me. It's communication. Can I help an individual staff member get to a point where he maybe want to be a number 50 in Google, and that's his ambition. He wants to go and work in that position in that particular company, and he's using us as a startup to get the experience. I'm okay with that. Absolutely comfortable with that. You know, let's communicate. If he can help us along the way, we help him. No problem at all. But I think it comes back to that communication point again.
Yeah, a key point. Ronan McGrath from McGrath Construction. Tell us about the business first of all, and and a bit about yourself then over the last year and a half and leadership.
Yeah, so our business, we're a quantity surveying practice, and we've offices in Dublin and in Wexford. So a lot of the business, we have two sides of the business. One would be, you know, large scale multi-unit residential developments. So we've got apartment blocks, you know, housing estates, a lot of that. And the other side we would be helping, you know, subcontractors, builders. We'd be helping a lot of people within the industry, architects, homeowners who are building, renovating, extending. So anywhere from, you know, someone doing an extension renovation right up to, you know, 88 apartments, you know, in the city centre. So it's quite a range of the business, you know. And I suppose over the last few years we've been you know, on a bit of a growth spurt, as I call it myself, and it's been going quite well. So when we got to I suppose last month, when the COVID was kind of kicking in, we were on the cusp of what we believed was a large rise in activity, and I suppose the whole industry shut down at that time. So it was really a very confusing time for us to know how to react to it. But we reacted fast. We had just, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before the shutdown came in, we'd actually just employed ISO 9001. We'd actually gotten registered as ISO 9001, which was a big achievement for the company. And what I found the benefit of that was, in the end, was this system that we were building up, this ISO business management system that we were working on, that the staff actually were part of building that system, and they were consulted every single step of the way about, you know, how we should do this, how we should operate. And, you know, we, for example, we have weekly meetings, and every single one of those weekly meetings, we have a minute on the meeting for continuous improvement. And that's just one of the things. So every week, everybody has an opportunity to talk about continuous improvement and how we can improve either what it is we're doing or how we're doing it, or how the staff feel about it. So I'd echo what Ciarán said there on communication. You know, you can't communicate enough, and I think that was what we had to do, just a weekly meeting, and look at that. Again, we've grown our own business. We've grown since, I suppose, day one of COVID. We've grown to a point where we're probably about 40% more staff than we did at the start. And again, that was just pure relentless look, we're not going to let this COVID situation stop us. We did have to do pay cuts and things like that. That was the position we were in, and you know, we had to get through that, and that was tough to manage, and there was a lot in it. So it was certainly something that I think the systems we had in place and the communications that we have in place helped us a lot. We do something like what Ciarán mentioned there. Every 3 months we do EPMDS, which is Employee Performance Management System, and we sit down and we have a chat and we go through, you know, their performances and, you know, their key result areas, how they're doing in the key result areas, why those are important, what that leads to, why these results are important, and, you know, what that means for you when your results go up and when companies' results go up, and how it's all linked. But as well as that, we set out a section right at the end for their business development goals and their personal development goals. So I want to know that, look, my main thing right now is that I'm wanting to start a family, or that, you know, we're looking to buy a house and we're getting a mortgage sorted. I want to know that about my staff, and to see, is there any way I can help them and move them on, because I want to know what motivates them. I want to know what drives them. And you made an excellent point at the start, Eddie, about knowing the person. And that's what it's all about, is knowing the person, knowing what drives them, knowing what's interesting, knowing why they get up out of bed in the morning. We all know why we get out of bed in the morning. But again, we want to know what motivates these guys, and we want to be able to give that to them and provide that to them.
Yeah, it's a great success story, that not only yourself and Ciarán before you, the growth through COVID is something that's very interesting, and we're hearing a lot of that actually on the podcasts. And I think as we read through it, what seems to be the connecting line is that people have sort of upped their game in a way, and had to perform to another level that maybe they didn't even know as individuals within the company, or as a company themselves, that they had. And it's going to leave a lot of these types of companies, I think, a lot better positioned afterwards. Cathal, can I talk to you, Cathal Sheridan of Hukubalance? Tell us a little about the business, first of all, and then about your own last year and a half and your style of leadership.
Sure. So similar to Ciarán, I came out of my apprenticeship as a cabinet maker in 2007. Same response really, as like, what do we do now? So after a few years, I went back and I studied industrial design. So from those two levels of experience, I kind of came up with the brand, and we were always set up for online. That was my primary goal back in 2018. Be online, sell direct to customer, really have a positive experience with the customers. So when COVID came along, we had everything in place to kind of really look after our customers. The brand was being looked after very well by our digital management team. So yeah, it's been an interesting year. Like at the start, I was kind of lost myself. I didn't know where we were going to go or what we were going to do or how people were going to react. But because we had everything in place, and then we saw everyone else rushing to get online and get set up so they can sell direct to their customers, we were already there. So we saw significant growth last year. You know, we're probably 2 years ahead of schedule now, where we wanted to be. So, and as a result of that, obviously we had to increase our staff. And before that, I'd only ever managed myself as a freelance designer. Mm-hmm. So it was quite a learning curve last year. It's the same as the guys. It's like communication is key. And it's funny, in February, I sat everybody down and I had a conversation with them. I was like, why are you here? What do you want? And where do you want to be in 5 years? Like, what's your goal? And for some reason, they all want to stay. So I must be doing something reasonably okay. I think the big thing for the people that work with us, I asked them is why they want to be part of Huku. And I want them to understand, why should Huku even exist? Because I think once you know your why, it's easier to really work towards a goal. And like, our why is very simple. It's creating really high quality products that are earth friendly, that are good for you and make you happy. And all the guys that work with us at the moment, they're all into board sports, so they all use the boards themselves. So they all benefit from them directly, and they can see the positive kind of outcome of that. So they enjoy passing that on. So yeah, it's been an interesting year, but again, it's interesting. It's because I'm only learning really as I go, and again, the communication is the biggest task for us. Yeah, and making sure everyone's happy with what's going on. I sometimes feel like I'm not so much a leader, but on the same level as the guys, and that can be troublesome sometimes, because obviously people want to look up to the leader and say, well, where are we going? How are we reacting to this? How are we reacting to that? So I did have to take kind of elevate myself up from the team to make those decisions, and sometimes, you know, make the call that everyone was scared to make, and that's our job.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting stuff there, Eddie, in terms of communication being a key in leadership. What's your take on what you've heard?
So, like, I have to say, well done, guys, on the positivity for today, the getting through COVID, and very reflective of again, lots of my clients in terms of communicating with team members, especially at the start of all this mayhem. And secondly, from that, the communication back and forth to the team about that, you know, my clients as business owners would be sitting back and, you know, looking at the team and looking at the business, and realizing that there was a lot of wasted time and energy and a lot of fat in the company, that you're going, you know what, we're not going back to do that anymore, because that's a waste of time. It's unprofitable. We're not doing anything in that area, really. We're just wasting our own time. There's a lot of working through that, becoming leaner, and I think you guys are you know, examples of this, of getting actually more productive and engaging more team members and systemizing. I love that bit, Ronan, in terms of that systemizing piece. That's really important. And the same for you, Ciarán, is that, you know, the strategy and the passion, getting the culture correct. And I think those two things, and we talk about this quite a lot in Action Coaches, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you've got the greatest strategy and system in the world, if the culture is poor in the company, it's really hard to get it put in play. You know, if the culture is correct, then you can build a system. And, you know, the analogy that I typically use is that if you work in Coca-Cola, or you work in a brand that is global, you know that the system is the brand, and that veering away from the system, trying to make Coca-Cola differently, is not the way forward. Sticking completely to the system makes everybody understand that the end user is getting a great result. Sticking to the system, having a very, very I suppose, optimized way of interacting with your customers is really important. I think that sort of shows through as well in you, Cathal, in terms of, you know, starting off small, all of a sudden your team is there and you engage them in the culture of the company, and then the systems can play out. Very often I see people trying to shoehorn systems into people that are disenfranchised or not, don't really care. And the fact, I think, that all of you have mentioned a little bit about personal goals and where you're going, and understanding that, you know, there's a fleetingness, or if that's even a word, of the team coming in and you accepting them for 3, 4, 5 years and being okay with them moving on. And, you know, all of that stuff is a very modern way of looking at business and looking at leadership.
Hear my talking and nobody listening. Yeah. Can I turn to you all just for a second at the end and look at role models that you might have? Now, it could be somebody in business, in sport, in politics. Who have you sort of looked up to, or can say this is a leader I would admire? We turn to you first, Ronan, on that. Is there anyone you'd pick out?
Yeah, put me on the spot first, I suppose. Yeah, look, again, as I mentioned to Eddie, you know, I'm a big fan of sport, and I've coached a lot of soccer in my time as well. So I do look up to a lot of people in sport in terms of role models, and I suppose a lot of business coaches as well. I suppose if I had to look up to one coach, I have to go with two coaches because I can't go with one, because I'm kind of a little bit of both, really. So one coach would be Martin O'Neill, and the other coach would obviously be Pep Guardiola. And the reason why it's Pep Guardiola is because, again, it's and you mentioned this, Eddie, as well. It's about everything that is within our control we perfect. So that is certainly something that we've done with the systems that we have in our businesses, that we've looked inside and we've said, what can we perfect? What can we do better? Where are the 1% and 2% that we can get better out of what we do? You know, forsaking everybody else, forsaking every other thing that's happening in the market. Where are 1 or 2% that we can improve and be the very best in class that we can? And I think that's what you can see with Pep Guardiola at a time when football was kind of going a different way, and he just said, okay, no, look, I'm just going to do the purest of the pure and go that way. And then the other one is Martin O'Neill, and because, you know, I've seen a lot of Martin O'Neill's teams, and you know, there's that thing about leadership and there's that thing about management where sometimes you just need to pull a rabbit out of a hat. Sometimes everyone is looking at you to pull a rabbit out of a hat and to come up with something. And I think that's a lot of what Martin O'Neill does, and just how he motivates people. I think that would be certainly in the sporting world. It would be somebody I would look up to. And then outside of the sporting world, there would be two people which would be, and they both actually have very similar stories, and they're almost father and son at the moment, will be Kevin Hart and The Rock. Those were two people who very much have a very similar story. You know, wouldn't have had an easy background. The Rock went through an awful lot, so did Kevin Hart, and they've come out the other side of that just as role models for all the world, really, for all the world to see. And just one part, you know, the title of Kevin Hart's recent book is just The Decision, and it just centers around that whole thing of that everything you do in your life, everything you've done in your life, everything you're going to do, and everything that you've got was all the result of a decision you made years ago, a decision you're making now, or a series of decisions. And I think that's just something that has resonated with me there over the last year, that everything that you do is a decision. And that's the kind of the leadership, I think, and the, you know, the role models that I would look up to. Is just, look, it's the decision. If you want to do that, then you've got to make the decision to do it, no matter what that is. And I suppose those will be, so I picked four. And I asked me,
four good ones.
Always ask for more.
That's excellent. And you, Cathal, let's go to Cathal now in terms of who would you pick out as good role models?
So I'd look towards Simon Sinek a lot, the author and motivational speaker. He's very much about the why we work with people and why they should give what they give to a job, when, as the guy said earlier, it's only a job to some people. They want to clock out and go. So if you can really get the why as to what they're doing, then they'll give, or what you're doing to them, then they'll give a lot more back. It's interesting things. It's like, you know, a good leader is there to take care of those who take care of the business. not so much the business. So I do spend a lot of time chatting to the team and making sure that they're happy. And really what I found challenging in the beginning was getting them to tell me what's wrong, what needs improving.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm very much hands off. I want the person who's qualified to do it to come in and do it, because that's what they know how to do. So, but then you also want them to tell you how to improve things on their side, because that's their experience. So Simon Sinek is definitely one of the guys. And I suppose Jordan Peterson would be another person I'd watch a lot of and read a lot about. Again, it's down to more the people and the whys and how it's going to help people. And I suppose the whole hierarchy of Maslow's hierarchy of needs you'd look into, I suppose, so life more so than anything else. But they're not sports analysis there, but
they're great. They're great leaders, great figures.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Ciarán, who would you pick out?
I think it's probably similar to the lads there. Probably be difficult to sort of pin it to one. I mean, similar to sort of life in general. You're the average of the 5 people to spend the most time with. I think when you view leadership through the similar lens, you're probably trying to style yourself to 5 maybe, and one of them or 2 of them could be within sports. So for me, when I went into business very early, I had a great mentor who I still have a lot of respect for today, a guy by the name in Sydney by the name of Jack Delosa, who was actually 4 or 5 years my junior. So he was in his mid-20s, and he just had done everything that I had wanted to do, and had done it very successfully. And he said one thing to me very, very early in my just career to get into business, and that's, try and be the dumbest man in the room at all times, and that stuck with me through the years, and that's been a good one. On the sports side, I'm a huge football fan. So, obviously I'm a United fan, so Alex Ferguson would always be at the top of the list, just a born winner, and you've got to take a lot from that. And anyone who's in that sense played for him has a lot of time respect. The one thing that I'd bring back to is I've always heard of Joe Smith's, and something Ronan touched on there is control the controllables. And I remember that stuck in my head when COVID actually hit to do a full circle on it. What are we in control of here in this COVID situation? I always remember that Joe Smith quote of, we've got to control the controllables. Do what we know we can be doing, focus on that. And that was really the approach I actually took to COVID. What are we in control of here? And the rest of it is just noise. It's noise around us that we can't control. So why would we spend, 2 hours of our week even thinking about what's on the outside? We need to focus on what's on the inside, and we just need to keep going. I do love the sports analogy and the similarities and parallels between sports and business. Very much sports, successful sports athletes, very vision focused, very mission focused. A lot of the time in management, value based, like, do this particular player or the team member fit to the value of the club. And they also all understand that losing is a part of the process. I do enjoy the parallels between the two.
Great. Eddie, just while we wrap up, I want to go back to you on one thing, and that's your clients are business leaders. Okay, so they lead and they manage teams, and presumably they do that well. Yet your job is different again. It's to coach those guys. So
Yeah.
why do business leaders require coaching in that aspect?
There's 2, I think, really good reasons for that, and they come back to the knowledge of the sport, knowledge of the player. So with Action Coach, we get a really, really intense education about every sort of aspect of how the business works. And I just want to put something in play here, is that business owner occupation is not necessarily anything that you've ever trained in or spent a lot of time in. The technical nature of the company is probably a lot of time you spent in it. So in other words, I might have spent 4 years becoming a carpenter, 3 or 4 years becoming a quantity surveyor. I might have spent a lot of time doing that industrial design stuff, Cathal. But how much time have I actually learned to be a business owner? What are the metrics what do I have to learn? That's the first part. And the second part then is there's 2 aspects to the second part, which is accountability and understanding the player. Very often, all of the guys that I coach are very engaged, very motivated, but sometimes it's motivated in the wrong direction. Okay, and having some accountability to say, okay, we agree that this is the piece that we're going to fix in the business this week, bring it back to me, and let's review. So that accountability piece for business owners is really important, because no one else is going to do it for them. It's very difficult to be self-accountable all of the time. You know, we let the ball drop. And the other piece that's, I think, important is, and you mentioned it, a few of you, in terms of, you know, looking up to players or actually arriving with stuff done for somebody is very motivating, and we lose that as the business owner. We don't get the opportunity to finish something. We tend to manage people and they do things, but we're now engaged in doing something, and you know, there's praise and accountability, and there's, if it doesn't go well, there's a bit of hand slapping in terms of that piece as well, which is what we need. You know, we lose that when we migrate up to the top of the business. You know, we've experienced that before, and it's kind of engaging, and someone's there pushing us and stuff, and then all of a sudden we're at this pinnacle of the company and there's no one there with us.
Thanks very much, guys. I think that has been a very, very, very interesting conversation. So I want to thank each of you individually, Ciarán Brennan from Livecosts, Ronan McGrath from McGrath Construction, Cathal Sheridan from Hukubalance, and of course, every week, Eddie Walsh from Action Coach. So thank you, guys, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
All the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan.